7. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. He also told them this parable. Can the blind lead the blind? Lead the blind. Will they not both fall into a pit? The student is not above the teacher, but everyone who is fully trained will be like their teacher. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, "Brother, let me take the speck out of your eye," when you yourself fail to see the plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye.
Okay, well, years ago I was discussing Christianity with a friend who wasn't a Christian, late night discussion, and he was aware in the conversation, as was I, that the way he was living his life was something that would need to change if he were to become a Christian. If he were to decide, like our friends have today, he wanted to be identified with Jesus, certain things were going to have to change. And he said to me, "How is it that you think you can say that my choices are wrong?" Well, I tried to explain. I said, "Well, I believe God made us." I said, He knows the right way we should live because He created us. In fact, He offers something better than whatever we have to give up if we turn to follow Jesus. I explained all of that. And he said to me, "Aha!" This friend, who as far as I could tell, had never ever even opened the Bible. He said, "Aha! But Jesus said, don't judge or you'll be judged." This is probably, this bit of the Bible, one of the best known and least understood verses in the whole Bible. Maybe if you're a guest here today, you're particularly here for a baptism of a friend, maybe you're worried that your friend is going to become a judgmental, moralizing Christian. I'd be surprised if that's what you find about them, but maybe you're worried about that. Well, here it is in black and white. They're not allowed to judge you. And that can be a very useful tool, like with my friend. Like with my friend, it's a way of warning people off to use this verse. To say, "You cannot judge me. So, no comments on my life, please." And if you join us at this special day as a church, we are reading and trying to understand these words from the mouth of Jesus. And perhaps, as I said, these, "Judge not," are the most famous. Here's the thing that I find, though. I find in this world where everybody says, "You better not judge me," I find people quite judgmental. I don't know about you. How are tabloid newspapers making money? Because we love being judgmental. How is ire and anger stirred up on the internet about politicians receiving money for their clothes, or so-and-so famous celebrity having their fourth wife? How has that all become a thing that makes money? Because we love judging people. We're very judgmental. We're just like, "You better not judge me." Maybe you can recognize that and you feel a bit exhausted. Exhausted of condemning other people and worrying about being condemned. That's the world that we live in. You're worried about being judged and judging. Many, many people's lives are controlled by concern that other people are judging them, that their parenting is bad, that they look strange, that they've got a bad haircut. And so because we worry about being judged, we launch a preemptive strike and judge other people. And easy, people in newspapers, famous people, they never even know. We just get to feel better. And so this verse becomes like a cross against vampires. "You better not judge me." Meanwhile, Judging is our national pastime. Well, if you find yourself as a perpetrator and victim of condemnation, Jesus is actually saying there is a way to be free of both. He's not saying nobody will ever make any moral judgments ever. I wonder, did you notice in the passage that Nicky read, later on in the passage, he turns to people and says, "You hypocrites." That is a moral judgment. So he can't be saying no moral judgments ever. What Jesus does is this: he gives us a way to see what's right and wrong, to be able to discern that, but to focus on ourselves making the world better, without the fear of being condemned ourselves. That's the hard thing about self-examination. What will we find? That Jesus makes self-examination a safe process. Jesus makes it for you that other people's opinions do not matter. And so here he is saying to his followers, now that I've done that for you, don't you be doing it to other people. And that's the life we're welcoming these people to grow in and know today. The life of freedom from judgment and freedom from judging. Let's see the first thing that we see today, what Jesus is saying. He says, we should be big-hearted. Should come up to the screen. Yeah. There we go, big-hearted. A while ago, I had a friend called Christina, and she kept on her mantelpiece a rather tatty-looking plastic bag that was wrapped in an elastic band. The reason she had that was because she'd spent a year doing relief and development work in a developing country in which most people were Christians. And she was doing work with children. At the end of the year, this small boy, his only toy was this makeshift football made from a plastic bag and a rubber band. And when she left, he gave it to her. And she kept it on her mantelpiece to remind her that disciples, followers, trusters in Jesus, no matter how much they have, they're by instinct generous, giving people, believing, as Jesus says here, it's better for others and myself to be a giver, not a receiver. Jesus uses this powerful image of a measure pressed down and like running over. So he says, if you give away the measure that you get back, it's like you fill a jar with sand and then it's really packed on and then more is poured in until it's absolutely overflowing. He says that's the life you get back if you are a generous, big-hearted person following Jesus. Here's something I note about having a lot of people in our church who are at a formative, early, young adult stage of life. Many people here in our church at that stage in life don't have much material stuff. They're studying, or they're new to the country, or they're dependent on the state, or in first jobs and trying to make ends meet. And so there are people who say, someday I will become generous. Someday when I have more, I will be generous. At the moment, I'm a taker. And my experience is, barring some radical intervention, those people never become generous. The habit of holding everything you've got is a habit that sticks. I've also noted this, like my friend, you travel to parts of the world where, as far as we are concerned, Christians have absolutely nothing. And as soon as you're in their home, all they want to do is share with you, give you everything. There was one day I was setting up for church with someone from another culture, a non-British culture, someone who didn't have much money at all. And I said to him, oh, I like your jumper. And he was like, oh, great, you can have it. Start taking it off. It's just his natural reaction is to be generous, big-hearted, and giving. So this whole thing about not judging is part of a wider thing that knowing Jesus does. If you've met Jesus, he gives you a generous spirit. We will believe, because of Jesus, it's actually better to give stuff away than keep it. Not just for other people who receive it, but I will be more blessed if I share generously and if I hold tightly to everything. And this thing about not rushing to make judgments about people, wanting to understand them, wanting to bless rather than push them out and condemn them, that comes from knowing God. It's part of this same big heart. So people who've met Jesus should not hold condemnation for people when they do things that are wrong against you. People who know Jesus should not hold grudges and anger against people. We should forgive them. Because Jesus says knowing him gives that sort of big, generous, magnanimous heart. And actually Jesus says this, it's not just you must forgive people, stop judging. It's like it will be better for you if you can learn to live that way. If you can learn to live generously towards people in all that way, what will come back to you in all sorts of ways is the measure packed on and more poured in, and it overflows. And of course, I think we actually all know that's true. Do you know people who like holding grudges, accruing stuff, and becoming more and more successful in whatever field they've chosen, and that's their aim in life? You probably know someone like that. Just think about them for a moment. Are they nice? Are they contented? Are they overflowing in life and connection to the world? Of course they aren't. But Jesus says, have this generous spirit where forgiveness flows out of you, lack of condemnation, giving to other people, you will find your life overflows in all the ways that matter. Here's the second thing that we see. We said big-hearted. Second thing is big-eared and big-eyed. This week I had a WhatsApp discussion with someone asking me about some Christian content they were watching on YouTube. And they were saying, it seems a bit weird, this YouTube video I'm watching. It seems sort of right and sort of wrong. How do you discern whether what you're watching on the internet is correct? Well, there's lots of answers to that. One answer is that over time you learn more of what the Bible says, and then you can spot when someone's saying something that's not right. And here's a simpler test. It only works for people you know teaching you in the church rather than randoms on the internet. What is their life like? Are they living in the simple, generous ways that Jesus describes here, as we see in this passage? Are they not seeking wealth? Are they loving their enemies? Are they generous? Are they humble? Are they not thinking that they're better to other people? See what Jesus is saying in this passage. He says, if you're still blind to all of that, you're just going to lead people in a bad direction. How can the blind lead the blind? So he says, look to see if the person you're talking to has got what I'm talking about here. Do they live this generous and judgmental and condemning life? Of course you still need to listen to the content of what they say, but their life is a useful marker. And someone not living this way will lead you to fall into a pit in the end. Why is that? Because as Jesus says, a student fully trained will become like his teacher. Jesus is saying something very profound here. When it comes to spiritual life, you don't just become like what someone says to you. You become like them. If you're sitting under someone's leadership, they're discipling you, they're pointing you to God, you won't just become like what they say, you will become like what they are. Which is why Christians will always be most committed to listening to Jesus himself. He's the one we want to become like. But here at this moment even, there is a spiritual power at work, which is even I at this moment will be passing on not just words to you, but a life. Now that may be both a brave and stupid thing to say, standing in the pulpit. And believe me, I still feel like I'm a big learner in all of this. I'll do my best to be transparent. But that's why Jesus now moves on to talk about people who presume to speak to other people, who see other people's faults. And he says, listen, if you're someone seeking to teach other people, here's what he says, you're much more likely to see their faults than your own, even if yours are much bigger than theirs. So even if theirs is a speck and yours is a plank, the truth about human nature is this. If you are ever engaging with other people, you are always more likely to see what they're getting wrong than what you're getting wrong. even if what they're getting wrong is much smaller than what you're getting wrong. And you notice specks and planks, they're made of the same stuff. Sawdust is the description that we have in our Bibles. It's the same stuff, they're both made of wood, it's just one bigger than the other. Have you noticed this? People tend to spot and be annoyed by their own faults in other people. I don't know whether you've ever had that experience. Have you ever been in the office and there's someone who's always like complaining about everything and gossiping about people and saying, you never heard what happened there? And then one day at the tea break they say to you, do you know what I don't like about working here? It's a very gossipy office. Like, what? It is because of you. When have you discovered that? Or someone who you feel like they're always causing tension, they're always causing difficulty, they're always causing anger. You know, they're always provoking other people. And then they say to you, everybody just has such a problem with anger here, don't they? And it's like, well, we do have a problem, but I wouldn't call it anger. I can give it a different name. You might have discovered that. It's always bad-tempered people who are saying, stop getting angry with me. Like, why don't you stop getting angry with us? Now, Jesus is saying to all of us, we can see that at work in the world because we all are that person. Jesus says, the fault you see in other people, in all likelihood, you have it in spades yourself. And so before you become a person who can't see, leading other people into trouble, blinded by your own faults, you should spend time on removing the big problem that you have that's stopping you seeing clearly. This is a good diagnosis, actually. Is there something about other people generally that you say really gets on my nerves? That type of person really annoys me. No, that person really annoys me because they're always telling me what to do. Could it be that's because you have the problem of liking to tell other people what to do? It's a good lesson if something's really annoying you. And instead, therefore, of saying, you should stop annoying me, stop telling me what to do, look at your own plank. Why is it I'm so averse to being told what to do? That removes the plank. That means you can actually probably help someone else. And you know it is actually true, isn't it? It's really hard to take correction from someone you think has not examined themselves. You know, if someone comes to you and says, you were late today, isn't your response always to say, yes, but you're always late? Very hard to take correction from someone who hasn't done the work of removing the plank. So if you're a listener, that's my friend, talk about YouTube, I think Jesus is saying here, feel free to ignore someone who's making lots of money selling books about greed. Or feel free to ignore someone who loves power telling you you ought to be more servant-hearted. Students become like their teachers. Or you do not have to listen to someone's call to be involved in social justice if they left their church because people were annoying them. That's listening. Does their life match their words? Because students will become like their teachers. If you're a talker, if you ever think it's your job to correct someone else, and it might be to correct them, I do want to say not to complain about them to a third party, but it might be your job to correct someone sometime. Have a long, careful look at yourself. And if you've spotted the fault in other people, prayerfully consider that that might be because it's your own fault, and remove that plank first. Can you imagine life if we actually did that? You know, instead of saying, could you cut me a bit more slack, you're so impatient with me, I would say, I might be feeling this way because I'm an impatient person. That would really help our relationship. Instead of saying, everyone is forcing me to work so hard, maybe think, right, am I the type of person who puts heavy burdens on other people? Maybe you come to church and you say, I wish people in this church would wear something more appropriate. Or maybe it's that you like lustfully looking at people. It's not got anything to do with what they wear. Imagine if we lived this way that Jesus is describing. And remember we said last week, this isn't like A-level Christianity for really advanced Christians. He thinks this is normal Christian living, to love other people while they're sinful and hate our own sin. It's easier as well to take correction from someone who you realise is doing that. Here at church, we have all sorts of groups that meet to study the Bible during the week, as well as here at Sunday. You're very welcome to join one. Now, occasionally the problem in those groups is that you're the leader and nobody in the group wants to speak. You may have been in that Bible study group in the past. If you're in that group, please have mercy on the leader and say something, even if it's just like a comment about the weather. And I spoke to someone once, years ago, who was at our church briefly, and they said, I did try going to a small group, but no one there really wanted to listen to what I had to say. Now, can you see how Jesus here just unpicks that statement? He says, that's a very revealing comment you just made there. As he says, if you spotted that in the group, that they like talking more than listening, that's probably true about you. It's probably why you find the group annoying, because you are bad at listening and they were all talking. You probably aren't good at hearing what people have got to say. Second, he says, Jesus, if you're the type of person who thinks the point of being with other Christians is to speak about specks rather than listen about planks, you're the expert everyone should listen to. Well, perhaps this is a case of the blind leading the blind. Thirdly, Jesus would say, what about a bit of generosity? That's the heart I give people, generous to other people's feelings, giving to them, helping them, not judging or condemning them for the fact they didn't let me speak. How about being there and giving other people that space and seeing it as an act of generosity? You know, Jesus says you'll be more blessed. Given it will be given to you. And I just use that simple example to show that even in Christian circles, we've normalized behaviors and attitudes that are very far from what Jesus says. Lots of us would want to say to that person, oh, no one listened to you. Well, give it up, try a different group. Jesus says, be big-hearted, generous, non-judgmental. Listen to the people you want to become like. Carefully look at yourself before you criticize anyone else. This all seems so simple and obvious, and yet it throws up many, many problems. This is the third and last thing we'll see, a big problem. Here's one that might have occurred to you if you're into reading language closely. This is a sort of niche problem you might have spotted. It says, don't condemn and you won't be condemned. That sounds like I will be judged on whether I judge or not, but that's a judgment. So to put it briefly, do I escape judgment if I am judged or not judged? You can think about that. Here's an even bigger, harder question. Where do we find the strength to look at ourselves this hard and not collapse under the weight of our failure? Here's a very normal thought process that is definitely one of mine, I suspect one of yours. When have you ever been late for a meeting? Late for a meeting is so embarrassing, everyone's already sitting around the table. Of course, the only empty chairs at the front of the room, so everybody sees you. I have to get out of the way. Would you just go out, just come sit down? Oh, I'm so embarrassed to feel late. And then someone else is later than you. You're like, I'm not the latest. Very normal thought process. But can you see how that is basically just using someone else's failure for your own benefit? It's the opposite of this generous heart to other people that Jesus is teaching us about. And I'm saying that not to condemn anybody because Jesus says I can't, but to say, look how normal it is for us not to operate the way Jesus is describing here. It seems so normal. It feels like if I begin to examine myself in the way Jesus is describing, how will that not crush me? How do I go through life carefully making sure I don't think I'm better than anybody else, without constantly feeling burdened by that? Who is there who's really willing to face up to the fact that nearly every interaction I have with other people is tinged by what I might be able to get from them rather than what I can give to them? Similarly, other people's faults are just irritating, aren't they? It feels easier to short-circuit this and say, could you just stop that? Rather than carefully, humbly spotting my own faults first, and on, and on, and on. It's all very well saying, live a life outside the cycle of judgment, but how do we do that? And that's actually what we're celebrating in the lives of these three people today, that there is an entirely new principle at work. Jesus calls it in this passage, mercy. He says it in the passage just before. He says, our Heavenly Father is merciful. And if you come to know him, a new principle where you are compassionate and kind to people because that's the way you've been treated, that becomes the ruling principle of your life. Here's the thing, the judgment we receive from other people, we receive because we actually are under God's judgment. We actually are on the wrong side of God. When we feel guilty for getting things wrong, we are right. We do get things wrong. But Jesus died to take the punishment, the judgment that we deserve from God. So now all that we get from God is mercy, compassion, undeserved kindness. The principle of judgment is removed. All you will get from God once you trust Jesus is this undeserved, never-ending, refreshing compassion. And that means you can name the things that are wrong. If you start looking for planks in your own eyes and you discover, wow, there's this really big one. It's really bad. I need to deal with that. The temptation is to be crushed. Oh, I'm such a terrible person. But God says, no, I love to have mercy for that. Let me help you. Remove the plank. And if you think that's the way God is going to treat you forever, guaranteed by Jesus' death, what does that mean you become like to other people? Merciful, generous, big-hearted, not looking for ways to make yourself feel better on their failure, but looking for ways to extend compassion to them. And so that's why Jesus says, if you are judgmental and condemning and ungenerous always, it's because you're choosing the principle of judgment and rejecting mercy. And that's why he says, judge others and you will be judged. He says, you've not taken on the view of life that I have received God's mercy. You're saying, no, I'm going to judge other people and God can judge me. Take that route if you want. But here is the hope of a generous, big-hearted life. A humble, self-examining life. Without fear or worry or to feel attacked when bad stuff is exposed, because all there is from our Heavenly Father through Jesus is mercy, kindness, compassion for us. And baptism, as we'll go out to celebrate in just a few moments' time, is a celebration of that transformed life, a life moving from judgment to mercy. Free from the judgment of God, therefore free from the judgment of other people, and able to live this generous, non-condemning life for everybody else. So, as my friend said, judge not, and you won't be judged. It's not saying we can never make any moral judgments, and if you do, God will judge you back. Jesus is saying you can enter a life where God does not condemn you. That you can therefore learn to think you're not better than others. And eventually, as Jesus disciples you, the freedom that what other people think of you will never matter again.